All right, so this is the last day of Thinking Like an Historian module and dealing with the Civil Rights era or issues that can be connected to the Civil Rights movement. And today we're looking at tackling historical issues, right? So essentially being able to use the past and our knowledge and understanding of the past, or of history, I should say, to then see then to come up with opinions, right, or to come up with decisions or action steps for contemporary issues that we are faced with today. All right. So once again, I know I kind of stumbled over that. So today, what we're trying to do is we're tackling historical issues, and underlying that is really just being able to use our historical understanding, right, or understanding of history to help inform our responses or our actions to events and issues that are happening today. All right. So this one is going to be looking at taking down the Confederate flag. All right, so this is an article. This is your slide deck that you're going to make a copy of. It's only one slide. Don't worry about all these other things. It's only one slide. And it's going to have you read an article that was written right after 2015. And the murders at Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina, and how this, sparked this huge debate and intensified a lot of emotions about a symbol, the Confederate flag. So you're going to read the article, and you can find the versions of the articles here. All right. Also on the slide deck, once you make a copy of it, it has a link to the original location of the article if you wanted to use that as well. All right, and basically you're doing a couple things here. You're reading the article, and you are answering the 3 questions that are here on that slide deck, and you're submitting that. That's the first part of your assignment. The second part of your assignment is to contribute to the Jamboard. All right, so the Jamboard is looking at the pedagogical triangle of historical understanding, and the pedagogical triangle of historical understanding has 3/4 components: intellectual rigor, emotional engagement, and ethical reflection. And these all play off each other to some extent. And at the heart of these, something that is touched on, that's bringing them all together, informs civic responsibility. All right, so a couple things that I want you to do. I want you to answer these 3 questions on this slide or this frame of the pedagogical triangle. And I've kind of put them all out. Emotional engagement goes here, intellectual rigor goes here, ethical reflection goes there. And these are the questions. What moments in this text offer new information or knowledge that deepens your understanding about the nature and impact of the power of history? How, essentially, what moments in this text? And I'm looking at, you can give me specific quotes, or you can say when they talked about this, right? That help deepen your understanding as far as why history or the understanding of history is so important to us. What moments provoked an emotional response for you, right? Emotional response can mean a variety of things, but it hits you in your feels somehow, some way. What moments, all right? What was it going on in that text? What was being discussed, right? What was said that provoked that emotional response? And when you're doing these responses, you want to try to not only make sure that your name's associated to that sticky note, but also try to be as clear and provide as much context as possible in your response. One thing that might be helpful is using the text box for that, because the sticky notes, you have just a limited amount of space you can use. So you might want to use a text box if you find yourself taking up a lot of room. You can always add another frame. You guys are able to edit this, so you can add another frame and write on that. If you feel like the space is getting really cluttered, just make sure if you add another frame that you're saying intellectual rigor, right? And then you put your name and then you put your response. And that way I know which answer which question I should say you're referring to. And then the last one, what ethical questions does this source raise? And so what are ethical questions, right? Ethical questions ask us what the quote unquote right thing to do or what we should or ought to do in the face of some sort of moral dilemma. This often arises out of a conflict in values among individual groups, and I think you'll see that conflict in the source. It requires you to have some sort of moral reflection, right? Making evaluations and judgments about rights, duties, values, principles, right? And so, those are the ethical questions that I want you to try to come up with. On the fourth frame, it's left open. That's for informed civic responsibility. All right. I want you to reflect on how how this article in any way, right, gives you an idea of how you might be able to play a positive role in your peer groups, like your friends, right, your schools, your communities, and the larger role, and your ability and willingness to make history by acting on that belief. So what goes here is like, how can, right? How can you, take what you had in these three areas, right? Take your answers in those three areas, and how can you use that by, how did this, encourage or further your belief that how can you play a positive role with your friends? How can you play a positive role in your schools? How can you play a positive role in your communities? How can you play a positive role in the larger world, in greater society, right? What was it about reading this article, right? Prompted this belief, and how can you have that positive action, right? So one more time, civic responsibility. What what have you learned, right? What thoughts has this reading given you about how and why you can be a positive change or a positive citizen, take positive action amongst your friends, amongst your family, in the school, your community, or the larger society. All right, there it is. You can use the Canvas messages or email if you have any questions.